Empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men. Power Black men. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives.
Welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where the intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. This show is based on the simple idea that every Black man is capable of creating inner peace, dynamic health, great relationships, and financial abundance. Therefore, we provide insights and strategies to educate, motivate, and inspire Black men to reach their full potential and create the life of their dreams. So if you're ready for some high-octane motivation and inspiration that supports and empowers you to live the life you were born to live, get ready to shatter the stereotypes so you can build a life that lights you up and positively impacts the world. So now, let's shatter the stereotypes with your host, Coach Michael Taylor.
Hello and welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where the intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. And today we're talking about a stereotype that doesn't get nearly enough attention. The idea that teaching children is somehow women's work. So think about that for a moment. Millions of boys spend much of their childhood in classrooms, yet many of them can go years without ever having a man standing in front of that classroom as their teacher. My guest today believes we can change that. Curtis Valentine is an educator, advocate, policy leader, and the founder of Real Men Teach. And let me represent him here. Firm believer in his work. And he's got a movement created to challenge the narrative about who belongs in the classroom and to recruit, support, and retain more men in education. And while Curtis is a Black man whose work has powerfully addressed the need for Black male educators, his vision is larger than race. This is ultimately a conversation about men, about why boys and girls benefit from seeing caring, intelligent, compassionate, emotionally available men teaching, mentoring, nurturing, and leading. Curtis has now taken that mission to another level as the founding president of the Male Educator Network and Policy Institute, building a national movement around one powerful idea: America needs more men in education. He is also the author of the new book, Real Men Teach, which challenges us to rethink not only who becomes a teacher, but how we value the men who answer that calling. And that's why I wanted Curtis on Shatter the Stereotypes, because when a man walks into a classroom and teaches a child how to read, how to think, how to believe in themselves, how to navigate disappointment, or simply demonstrates what a healthy, caring adult man looks like, he isn't just teaching a lesson, he's shattering a stereotype. So without further ado, let's welcome Curtis to the show. Hello, Curtis, how are you?
Good to see you, Coach. It's always a pleasure. I was on your show in the past, and you never know when you get on a show whether you're gonna get invited back. But the fact that you did, finding out robbery to bring a brother back, man, I must be doing something right. So
absolutely. Well, again, I honestly believe the work you're doing is possibly the most important work we can do in society. Because again, my focus is on the changing roles of manhood and masculinity. And so obviously that includes male teachers, male educators, and it's important for us to have this dialogue. And we're going to kind of dive into some of the reasons why maybe men aren't participating in education. But for now, I do want to take just a quick second and start with your book.
Hey.
So, Real Men Teach, Reimagining the Future of Education. This is what we're going to be talking about. But before we dive into his work, we're going to ask him a few icebreaker questions. But I want the audience to know, first and foremost, about the book, Real Men Teach. Make sure you log on. It's available at pretty much all online bookstores, Curtis.
It's on Amazon right now. So
Amazon?
We're in right now at a discounted rate before it hits stores. But right now it's on Amazon.
Perfect. So again, Real Men Teach. Again, I'm a part of his network, Real Men Teach, and I consider myself to be an educator. I'm not in the classroom per se, but I coach and teach men around the globe. And so this message is close to my heart. And that was another reason why I wanted to have him on the show. So first of all, Curtis, tell us where you're from and tell us a little bit about your family, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Oh, absolutely. Again, thanks for having me on. I'm in the DC metro area. They call it the DMV. In particular, I'm here in Prince George's County, which is, um, a strong place, a great place to raise your kids, to serve your community. I'm a husband, I'm a father. My wife is an educator. She works for the school system here, has worked for 26 years for the school system, has rose through the ranks, school principal, vice principal, and now she manages principals. My two children attended public schools. My son just graduated from a local high school with a high school diploma and an associate's degree through a program that the school provided called P-Tech. He'll be heading off to Morehouse College this fall to play basketball, but also to study business. My daughter is in the same high school. She's a rising junior, going to get her associate's degree, and similarly wants to be a doctor. And so, as a father, as a husband, as someone who's mentored my son's friends, but also just men in my community, this is something that is a full time job. It doesn't stop when I come home. I do it 7 days a week because I know it's important for my community.
Nice. And again, you are obviously shattering all sorts of stereotypes. Great husband, great father, educator. Kudos to you, my friend. Now, name a woman who's inspired you to be who you are.
Well, I would say my wife. I mean, I think she's someone who's supported me in so many ways, has given me space to be who I need to be. You mentioned stereotypes. I think when you come into a marriage, all you know is what you can see. I had a strong father in my life. My dad, my parents married until my father passed away 10 years ago. But I had a way I wanted to show up as a husband and a father based off what I saw. And my wife had a way she wanted her husband to show up based off of what she saw with her father, and her parents are still married to this day. And so she inspired me to be a better father, a better husband, but also to continue to run forward in my education work because as a school principal, she had to deal with a lot of these issues around the shortage of male educators. And so when I first started this work, Real Men Teach, I wasn't sure about the response I'd get from women because I'm saying, hey, I want to center men, will be fathers and male educators at a time when women were also struggling. But she understood, Curtis. Yeah, I mean, our boys in these schools, they need more male educators, and I'm as big a fan as anybody else for this work. And she was able to be a voice to other women in education, both in her district but around the country, in support of this work. And so she inspired me so much, and will continue to inspire me as a mother and how she raises our children, excuse me, and fights for children every day. One thing she also does that I just want to highlight, she was a vice principal, I think back in 2018, maybe 17, I forget the year. And she had about 8 or 10 seniors who she was really close with. She's kept in contact with those about maybe 15 students for the last 10 years.
Wow.
And they come to our house twice a year, all 10 of them. And we sit around and we have conversations where you are. When they first started off, they were in college. Now some of them are graduated. Now some of them are looking to get married and have children. And she never disconnected from these young people who she invested in all throughout high school. And to see them move. And the last thing I'll just say, a few of them have become my son's mentors. So so when people say, Curtis, your son going to Morehouse, he's probably going because of you. I kind of push back a little bit because one of my wife's former students who went to Morehouse, who's about 26, 27, he has been a big mentor to my son. And he is sort of the personification of what my son wants to be in life. And he's a Morehouse man too. So that mentorship matters. My wife has done it. I've done it. And so it's a family affair.
Wow. That's outstanding. Now, I wrote a book called The Cure for Onlyness, A Black Man's Guide to Joy, Passion, and Purpose.
Mm.
And in that book, I talked about the unique challenges that we as men of color face when we're in environments where we're the only person of color. So I'm sure you've been in those environments. So how do you navigate those?
Well, I know who I am. Like a lot of us, when we walk into rooms, I over prepare, like a lot of us do. My goal is to be the smartest in the room on what I'm in the room for, and so to be an expert in my own space. So I've never felt insecure when I walk into the space. I don't care where I am,
Nice.
because I just know both I'm prepared. There are people who've gone before me who look like me who've been able to do it. Um, I know that um, the history of my family, my own ancestors, which I write about in my book, who have gone before me, have set a path for me. And so I've never felt any kind of way when I'm in a space. When I did my master's degree at Harvard University, and oftentimes people say, "Oh man, it's the best school in the world." But I like what W.E. Du Bois said when he was asked. He was asked, he graduated from Harvard back in 1890, the first African American to receive a PhD from Harvard, and he said, how does it feel to be a graduate of Harvard College, prestigious Harvard College? And W.E.B. Du Bois says, I guarantee you, it was Harvard's pleasure.
There you go.
And so, you
Nice.
know, I don't walk in spaces thinking that, you're doing me a favor. I'm walking in spaces that I'm here to contribute. And that in many cases, you're probably getting more out of me than I'm getting out of this space. And it's coming upon us that we find spaces that do give us more than take. And so that's really the journey of finding spaces that give more than take. Because a lot of spaces, oftentimes that don't look like us, are not giving. They're more taking. And so we have to find spaces that give and take less.
Absolutely. Now, last icebreaker. As a man who happens to be black, are
Mm.
you optimistic or pessimistic about the future in general?
I'm optimistic about the future. I can't move any other way. I have to wake up every morning with with promise. And here's why. I think if I assumed that I had no control over the future and that I'm simply just someone who's moving through the world and things are happening to him, then yes, I would be very pessimistic. But
Mm.
I wouldn't call myself overconfident, but I'm someone who prepares, but also surrounded by men like you and others who are part of a network and a brotherhood who've showed me anything is possible if we work together. When I started this Real Men Teach movement, back in 2020 in the middle of COVID, and I text messaged 100 men to purchase a hoodie for scholarships to put on social media. I got 100 yeses. I didn't get not one no. And that right there told me everything I need to know about the future. And here's the thing, coach. This is what people said to me. The biggest response. When I sent that message, I wasn't sure whether they were gonna, say, hey, I can't afford it, or maybe later. The first response was, the most common response was, Curtis, we were waiting for you.
Oh, yeah.
We were waiting. We've been watching you, bro. We've seen you work. We're trying to figure out how to support you. So to your viewers, people out there are watching your work, they're seeing you post. In many ways, they don't know what to do. They just love what you do. Whatever you produce, they love it. But they were just trying to figure out, how can I support you? And so whether it be this movement and purchasing a hoodie for yourself or for your son's teacher or for your husband or for your pastor, or just for a guy you met, yesterday you want to sponsor, or purchasing the book. The idea is that people can find ways to support this work, even if it doesn't directly affect them, because they understand, to the work that we're doing, you and I and others, that to have men in this world, young boys and men, but also adult men, to operate outside of their gifts, to operate at a lower capacity, lower frequency, affects the entire community, not just them. And we're seeing that, unfortunately, in a lot of ways. And if we can get back to a place where men showed up, were confident, educated, prepared, employed, um, contributing members of society, the world will look a lot better for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's dive into a little bit of this new book. I'm so excited because again, I honestly believe the greatest challenge we have in society is to redefine manhood and masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this idea that I guess, being a teacher is feminine. It's just like men just don't do that. So I'm curious, in your own experience, was there an event in your life that happened that made you realize that we needed more men in classrooms?
Good question. I think I finished Morehouse. I went to South Africa with the Peace Corps. I was teaching there. And I came back and became a teacher in my local middle school here, Oxon Hill Middle School, not far from my house now. And I was the only male teacher on the entire first floor. And I had way too many young men, students who just needed much more that I could give them in many ways, both in my time, both in my training, both in my patience, in my patience as well. And middle school students, sixth, seventh, eighth graders, they're pretty tall. So I walk in, man, these guys are up to my, some of them look at me dead in my face as eighth graders. And I realized, wow, the need for more men was so high. And I realized, you know, sadly that I could not give them what they needed, at least not by myself. And what I've created since then is what I wish I had then.
Yeah.
I wish I could call a Coach Taylor. I wish I could call brothers around the country and say, hey, bro, can y'all give me some advice on how to talk to these young men? Hey, does anyone mind jumping on a call with me? Is something wrong with me or is something wrong with the system? Hey, brothers, I'm thinking about leaving this career. Can someone please talk me out of it, right? And so in many ways, that experience, my first year teaching middle school here, and that was in 2003, really showed me the importance and need for more male educators.
Now, when you created the phrase real men teach, was there a specific stereotype about masculinity that you were intentionally trying to challenge?
Absolutely. I think this idea that women, teaching is a women's job, but also that men are incapable of being nurturing, of being patient, of being confident and a leader at the same time in a school setting. And so when I said real men teaching, some of you may know this is a play on some of y'all football fans. It's a play on the Raiders saying real men wear black. Some of y'all would know that. But I started using the hashtag real men teach. And I'm not sure why I decided to use it. I hadn't seen it anywhere else. It was this idea that I wanted to encapsulate what I was trying to do in a very pithy statement. And each word it has a lot of power to it. So when I say real, I'm talking about authenticity. And I'm not casting judgment on what reality is for someone else. Because you define what real means to you. Real toughness, real beauty, real patience. But when I say real, my thing is authenticity, being who you are. And so often with male educators, they don't feel like they can be who they are. And oftentimes that's why they leave. Even the idea of men, and to your point around manhood. Men, we get debates around gender and all other stuff. But when you and I were coming up, the word men or man came with a lot of strength. And it denoted protection and provision and leadership in the community. And when someone says, hey man, be a man, that means independence. That means standing up. That means being nurturing and caring and supporting your family. And then teach, I often get some people, and you mentioned this earlier in your introduction, that people often ask me, hey Kurt, I'm not in the classroom. Can I support your work? And am I invited to the Real Men Teach cookout? And I say, absolutely. I said, if you ask young men, put 100 men in a room right now and say, where did you learn the greatest lesson in life? I will guarantee you the majority of them will not say it was in a classroom.
Right.
It will be on a football field. It will be on a basketball court, maybe in church, maybe at the dinner table, maybe at a cookout, maybe at a corner store, maybe in a barber shop. And so if you're a barber and you're sitting there and a young man's in your chair and you are teaching him about the importance of entrepreneurship or being on time or financial literacy or how to treat a woman, you're teaching. You're a teacher. When you're a coach, when you're teaching consistency and perseverance and teamwork, those things that cut across all subject matters, you are a teacher. And so when I say real men teach, I mean authentic men who stand up for the community and serve people. That's who's invited. And I don't care who you love or how you show up. That's how we define real men teach.
Nice. Now, there are still young men who can imagine themselves becoming athletes or entrepreneurs, engineers, lawyers, or entertainers, but would never consider becoming teachers. Now, there was a time when we revered teachers, I think, and it
Oh,
seems like that's sort of been put on the back burner, if you will, or there's just not a lot of emphasis on teaching. But my belief is it is possibly the most important profession in our society. So, why do you think this whole idea of teaching has sort of fallen in the background and people are more interested in the other careers?
well, I will agree that there was an era, and I would say prior to the 70s, where to be a teacher was in the same category as being a doctor or lawyer or preacher. You made the same amount of money. You could buy a home in the same community. You had the same cachet when it came to how you showed up in the world. When you walk down the street, if you were Mr. Taylor, who taught history at the local high school, you probably were wearing a suit and tie. Everyone probably knew your name. You knew who the mayor was, city council member was. You drove a nice car, lived in a nice home. If your wife was also an educator, then doubly you probably you're top 1% in income. You were top 1% in how you showed up in the community. When the civil rights movement happened, most of those leaders were either preachers, teachers, doctors, or lawyers. And so a lot of that shifted when the world became majority women. And there's a whole conversation around whether increasing the number of male educators could also increase the salary for all teachers. Because when you see when a job is coded female, society thinks you could pay it less because you think that women are not the primary breadwinners. That being said, I think about why we don't see as many young men teaching. I think, and this gets into the very nature of this conversation, the title of your show, this idea of stereotypes. So here's what happened. And we did a study recently. My organization did a study. We partnered with the University of Chicago, and we interviewed 400 men in Wisconsin. And we asked them about why they teach, how they got into teaching, some things that might have kept them from teaching. Those that left. We've interviewed some who had left. But over 70% said they had experience working with children during their own adolescence.
Hmm.
Meaning, prior to young adulthood, they were coaching, mentoring, babysitting, watching out for children in their own community. And so they were getting into the space of teaching even before they got into the classroom. They were accepted. They weren't told, "Hey, Michael, you can't watch your little sister because we think you're going to hurt her. No, Michael, you can't watch your cousins. We think you're going to do something wrong. No, Michael, you're incapable of coaching younger children because we think that you're not nurturing enough." But something happened where you have parents who are telling people that they don't support their children becoming teachers, particularly their sons. These are parents. These are before the sons can even come to their own reality about wanting to teach. There's an interesting story in a book I'm reading recently where a mom comes to the neighbor. She has children in her home. She needs a babysitter. Walks over to the neighbor's house. The neighbor has 5 children, 4 young girls and a boy. The neighbor comes over and says, "Ma'am, you have 5 children. Can any of them be interested in babysitting my children?" And the mom names everyone in the house except for the boy.
Hmm.
Now, the boy is actually, there were 2 children that the mom named that were actually younger than the children she wanted to babysit. And so, how does a young boy receive that when their mom is saying, "I had there's all 4 of my children are capable of nurturing other children except my son." He heard that. He internalized that. And so
Yeah.
when people say, "We'd love for you to work with children," and they're saying, "Well, I don't believe that I'm capable of loving children and nurturing children that way." Fast forward a little further along. When you get into high school, you have teachers telling students who want to be teachers, "Don't teach."
Wow.
You have guidance counselors telling teachers, "Hey, Michael, you want to be a teacher, but you're so smart. You can be anything in the world. Why would you want to do this?" And so we even have this internal issue around supporting people in the profession that you're actually in. But here's the thing: in that same survey, the majority of the men who did teach said they were introduced to teaching by another man.
Hmm.
So it was Coach Taylor who said, hey, Kurt, man, I think you'd be a great teacher. You're great at it. I see how you work with your other. You're an upperclassman. I see how you coach the freshmen. I see how you organize things. I see how much you'd be great at coaching, but also at teaching history because I know it's your favorite subject. I think you'd be great at teaching music. I know you're great at the piano. But when you hear that from someone you respect, you're more likely to internalize that and to take that with you. And so we're not seeing, when you're told as a young child that you're capable of being nurturing, that if you become a teacher, you won't make your parents proud, because another study I was looking at, only 1 in 3 parents would support their children becoming a school teacher. And that's all students, not including, that's boys and girls. For boys, I'm sure it's much less. And so the boy comes home and says, Mom, I want to be a school teacher. And the mom is saying, no, why would you want to do that? Don't do that. And so we're dealing with stereotypes that come from our families, from our teachers, from our society. But here's the kicker. We all know from research, the most formative years in a child's life is in early childhood. And there is no greater group of educators in our community who are more stigmatized and stereotyped than men who teach early childhood. So when you have a young man who says, I want to teach kindergarten, their question is, why do you want to teach those little kids? What's your motive? What's wrong with you? And so
Mm.
talking to
Wow.
young men, talking to men who teach early childhood, the most important time they're getting stigmatized for wanting to work with young people. And there are men who posted in some of our groups that they are um, less likely to want to teach early childhood because they think that there's more of a chance for being falsely accused
Mhm.
of hurting children.
Yeah.
And so I'm somebody that when I was young, my mom had early childhood centers, my parents had daycare centers, and I would go work with young. I would go there to visit, and I'm walking in, and you got 3 and 4 year old kids, and I would come in, and I would just be in heaven.
Mm.
And at that point, I wish someone would have told me, Kurt, you'd be great in early childhood. But I also wonder whether I would have stuck with it if I knew that people were going to tell me that something's wrong with you, Kurt, if you want to work with children. Maybe why would you want to do that? That would have turned me off the rest of my life to being a teacher and maybe to being a father. I don't know. Because I think that also translates around how men show up around wanting to have children and feeling as if they're not capable of being a good father. So the stereotypes matter a lot, sadly, and we and my organization want to fight against those stereotypes, and we have a strategy for that.
Now, your work initially placed significant emphasis on recruiting and retaining men of color.
Mhm.
When did you realize this needed to become a broader national conversation about men in education?
Well, good. To me, it's not either or. So the two organizations that I co-founded, so Real Men Teach still operates and supports men of color. If you buy a hoodie like the one we're wearing, that will still go to scholarships specifically for men of color. And so we're still going to support those. And there are many organizations that do that. I mean, there are tons. And we could spend all night talking about all the organizations around the country that is specific to male educators. But what I also realized that for the last 10 years or so working in this space, when you make it about black men and Latino men and men of color, it does give others permission to say that's not our problem. That's okay. You all have it covered. But also realizing that the things that affect male educators of color are affecting, in many ways, affecting men of all backgrounds. So the stereotypes are not race specific. The parents telling their children, telling their young boys that they shouldn't be teachers are not race specific. The inability to pay for college. I just got a text message from one of our members of our college council who said, Mr. Valentine, do you have any scholarship money? And guess what? He's not a man of color. And so the issues that we're dealing with cut across race in many ways, but also what we're trying to affect is systems. These are laws at the state and federal level that are having a disproportionate impact on men and boys across all backgrounds. The last piece is what we're seeing in the research that shows, and you saw my book, The Forward, is written by Richard Reeves, also the chair of my board, who's written a book called Of Boys and Men. And he's highlighted where young boys and men are in America and how far we've fallen, but also how far we'll continue to fall if we do nothing, but also how the increasing number of male educators could help. Now, people are saying, Curtis, obviously having additional Black and Latino male educators matter to Black and Latino boys, absolutely. But they also matter to white girls as well. Where I teach at University of Maryland, most of my students are young white women. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. But I've had students come up to me at the end of the semester and say, Professor Valentine, I think I want to be a school teacher now because of your class. Similarly, we have white male students who are teaching black students in schools all around the country. And so for me, it was saying, what is the best for all students? And that means bringing everyone together, supporting groups, particularly for subgroups like early childhood, men who teach history, um, African American men, Latino men, and we'll have groups for those as well. Um, but a lot of this will be specific to how we address systems, laws at the state and federal level that cut across race.
Mm. Yeah, and again, I love what the 100 Black Men of America, their tagline says, what they see is what they'll be. And obviously in this country, we've had to deal with stereotypes of intelligence for a very long time. So I know that it's absolutely critical that men of color are shown and have an opportunity to showcase their intelligence. But again, I think it is not about race per se. It is about masculinity and changing the conversation with men, regardless of ethnicity, is how we'll start shifting, I think, the male paradigm, if you will. So again, I love where you're going with this because we have to still have representation. And the reason that I do this show, Shatter the Stereotypes, specifically for Black men, because it now gives them an opportunity to see something other than the stereotypes that they see. But at the same time, my work with men transcends ethnicity. It's about challenging men to redefine manhood and masculinity for the 21st century. Now, I read somewhere that approximately 23% of Americans te are teachers. 20% of American teachers are men. Is that about accurate? About 23%?
It's 23% now. It was 33% back in the 80s. And so
Okay.
we've dropped a third since then. As you know, that's all men. If you think about men of color, it's less than 2%. I mean, it's less than 4% for Black and Latino men to combine. So yes, the number is falling. If you think about subgroups, particularly around men in early childhood, it's in the single digits. It gets a little higher when we get to high school, but on average, it's at 23%. And the only impetus for what I'm trying to do in working with Congress and governors is to say, if we do nothing, if we just stand pat and we just wake up in the morning and go about our business and not be specific and very deliberate about how we do this, that 23% will get to 13% before you know it, and then 3% after that. And ask anyone, even those who don't support this work, do you think that it's okay that 97%, 87%, 67% of teachers are women? I mean, like, there's no profession that should be that just, I mean, because we understand that who is in front of you, whether it be doctors or teachers, that it matters who is in front of you. Studies show that it matters a lot. And so for work that you're doing and I'm doing, this is incredible work because you're right. Teachers have the most important job in this country.
So let me play devil's advocate just a bit here. So let me challenge the premise a little. So if a child has an outstanding female teacher, why does that child also need exposure to male teachers?
That's a good question. I think when you look at some of the impact of male educators on their students, there is an academic bump in math and reading, but there is also a bump that I think often is hard to quantify. That is ambition, that is consistency, that is how you show up in the world. And so when you have a male educator who you respect and look up to, you're more likely to apply to college, enter college, complete college. There are other issues around just how you show up around, to your point about masculinity, having positive images. And so you can have, and don't get me wrong, some of my best teachers were women. That didn't mean I needed. That didn't mean I needed. I didn't need my middle school principal, who I talk about in my book, Mr. Wade, any less. I needed him to help me take the academic achievements that Miss Baltuck and Miss Troke and Miss Nelson taught me, who are three white women, to take that and to walk headstrong, shoulders back into rooms and to verbalize that. It's not enough to have all that education, to know math and science and arithmetic, but still walk through the world as if you think you're not enough, or you lack the belief that I'm capable of going to college, even with the good grade. There are students who could get into college, who don't apply. There's students who are under applying to schools that they not applying to schools they probably could get into because they don't believe in themselves. But there's something about men who personify, men in education who personify what the men want to see. And I talk about in my book with Lawrence Carter, who's the dean of the chapel at Morehouse College, who taught and mentored people like Senator Raphael Warnock and Pastor Delman Coates and a bunch of and Jamal Bryant. He says, I always wanted to be a school principal. I said, Dean, I thought you wanted to be a minister all your life. He said, no. He mentioned that his elementary school principal, and he could visualize what he looked like when he walked into the classroom, when he walked into the room. Everybody stood up. And he walked down the hallway, everybody stopped and looked at him. He's walking through dressed to the nines, head back, confident, speaking in a way that people will stop and listen. And he said, I don't know what, but I want to be like him. And it wasn't much as what he was doing. It was how the world saw him. And so for me, the world of education is so important because I like how I feel when people call me Professor Valentine. Like I'm like, whoa, man, I appreciate that. Like, even though I know I'm a professor, it's something about being told in that word that what you have is something that is so important that they will give you the right to teach somebody else that thing. Because not everybody can be a teacher. Not everybody has expertise or the skill to do it. But when someone says a coach, even that word coach, not everybody can be a coach. But when you say coach, if you're in a grocery store and you hear someone call somebody coach, I'm going to turn around. I'm like, who are you talking to? Oh, you're a coach. Oh, wow. What do you coach? Oh, yeah, I coach football, coach baseball, I coach soccer, I coach hockey, coach. Wow. Bro, you have no idea how much I respect who you are. You only know who I am. I don't have to know who you are. You're a coach. You coach young people? Because I know how the coaches were to me. I know how the coaches, how they made me feel and how I walked away feeling confident. I was on the phone. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday about my son going to college. I want to make sure he moves in the world with confidence. And I said, man, everybody in our group chat, we all got confidence, bro. Where all this confidence come from? And we kind of agreed that we all played high school football. The whole crew. Like we had the whole group chat. You can't play high school sports coached by men and walk away without being confident. They're gonna break you down, but they're gonna build you back up again. And that's the thing I think about it. We need women. Don't get me wrong. My wife is an excellent educator,
right.
But we also need men.
So, is there something that a male teacher can provide that maybe a coach or a mentor, or pastor can't provide?
You said a male teacher versus a male, but someone out of the school versus in the school. What you're saying?
Yeah, basically, yes.
Well, the thing about being a male educator, which is different from being a pastor or anyone else, because it does give you availability and access to our young people on a day-to-day basis, where you can see them where they're at their best and when they're not at their best. And that you could be there with them through all of that. And that they can associate, hopefully, the progress they've made and the growth out of those dark places into the light with you, knowing that you were with them throughout the process. When I think about my uncle or people in my church or men outside of my school, my friends' fathers, I saw them, not as much, but when they came, I probably most likely was probably in a good space. So they were operating with me in a way that I was probably more likely to hear everything they were saying. I was very receptive. But when it comes to educators, we have to push through in ways and in days when our students just don't want to hear what we have to say. They had a bad night, something happened. and that we have to be resilient to push through when we have students who are struggling and reluctant to hear from us. And so there's something special about being a male educator, but also I think just the skill sets that it takes to impart a new skill, a new piece of knowledge, but also to adapt in real time. And so I think the one thing about the gifts that I have is that if I have four students who are trying to get a concept, and I tell a story to the students about the concept, and I realize, hold up, only one of y'all got it. Okay, so now I'm gonna go back. I said, okay, now, all right, let me try another one. So I try another story. Now I'm doing this in real time, right? I gotta sometimes I may prepare, sometimes I might gotta be like, let me just grab, you know, sort of trying to create a metaphor around how to do this. And I might do a second one. And I still may have the other two may not get it. I said, okay, all right, okay. And I may know one of the students personally, and I'm to your point, I may know he may play football. And I'll say, okay, you know that time when you had that play and you played that team and the referee called that. Okay, the same thing happened here in this concept. and so those are the things that I think oftentimes people outside of the school building don't have to deal with as much. And much as we still need them, but there's something about the ability for male educators to operate on their toes, to be entrepreneurial, but to be creative in the moment that you can't match anywhere else outside the building.
Yeah, and it sounds to me also that teachers have an opportunity to actually develop a deeper level of intimacy with their students because of the amount of time they spend with them, because of the different situations you're exposed to in school. So again, as a coach, life coach myself, I understand that my job is to help people ask better questions, right? So that's I don't give answers. I give you the better question, let you answer your own question. But I think because I think about a teacher named Miss Bussey. Now, I was raised in the 60s. Okay. Miss Bussey was my elementary school teacher.
Mm,
She was a heavyset white woman. And I remember that specifically because I was in a very abusive environment and she knew this. And so she took extra time to show me someone cared. And she probably wasn't supposed to do this, but after class, I would stay sometimes and help her clean the boards or whatever. But she'd always give me a hug.
mm,
And I will never forget her hugs. To me, it
mm,
was like hugging Santa Claus
mm.
because I felt that she cared for me. She cared about me. And that's something that again has touched me deeply. The impact that she had on my life as a kid. And so I think again, teachers have a unique opportunity to develop those types of connections, just like you were saying with your wife and her kids. So I just we minimize the importance of teachers. I guess that really sums it up. I think we minimize, and I guess we could blame it on capitalism and so forth and so on. But I think what you're doing is the solution, encouraging more men to come in. Now, I think we sometimes overlook the other half of this conversation, which is how do girls benefit from having healthy male teachers and role models in their classrooms?
Well, you said it yourself. I think there's when I first started teaching eighth grade, I had a lot of friction with my female students, and the women on my team were saying, "Well, Curtis, young lady who she's coming from this type of environment that's not very healthy at home, and the men in her home have not been very healthy around her." And so you may be the first time that she's had someone who's trying to be nice, and then the question is why? Like what's the catch? What's going on? Um, and so the ability to understand that the very nature of that we talked about when I mentioned man is that this sort of this more traditional provide protect. That the idea that is as an educator, my job is to provide in this case, knowledge and support and individual instruction, whatever you need to get where you need to go, to bring different stories and things but also to protect you from the harm that you think that you may have moving forward into spaces where other men are. Um, and so for me, to everything you meant, to be consistent, to show up every day, to be reassuring, to tell a young woman, you know what? I'm so proud of you. You'd be you'd be a great fill in the blank. It's interesting. A lot of the work that we're doing now around increasing male educators is modeled after the movement around putting more women into STEM. And so when I thought of my organization, I was looking at a model to study. And I was looking for an industry where you had underrepresentation of a gender. So you look at women in STEM going back to the 80s and 90s, it was pretty much similar to where we are with male educators now. It was sort of 75-25, maybe even less so. And when asked around why you had so few young women in STEM, one of the reasons, among others, was that there were male math teachers who were telling young girls that they were incapable of learning math or science, or women don't do that stuff. And so male teachers, and at that point in time, were very destructive. And I believe very firmly in spaces where people have been destructive, I think with the right support and over time, they can be constructive. And so if back then you had male teachers telling young girls you can't do math and leading in one direction, we have the opportunity for male teachers to see young girls and say the opposite. Do you know you can be anything you want to be? You can be, but to hear that from that voice of a male educator who, where we are in this country, the idea that a man would say that may have depending on who the young girl is, may land different, especially coming from someone who's traditionally had may not have believed the young girls. But hearing it from you, Mr. Valentine, hearing from you, Professor Valentine, hearing from you, Coach Taylor, you think I can be anything? Absolutely. You think I'm smart enough to go to college and become an electrical engineer or a mechanical engineer or industrial engineer? Absolutely. And so that power of male educators to support young women, both as in instruction, but also in the confidence that they're giving young men, similar. It goes both ways. You can both give support and confidence to young men, but at the same time, young women as well.
Yeah. Now, it is my belief, and I don't have any evidence to support this. This is just my belief. I personally believe that men have a larger impact on a child's self-esteem than women.
Mm.
That's just my belief. I think men, and when you talk about self-esteem, again, I just in my heart of hearts, I just believe that. And so in terms of the question I just posed, when girls have an opportunity to see a brother that is, and not necessarily just a black man, but a man who is nurturing, compassionate, empathetic, those types of things, and they haven't been exposed to that at home, it can be sort of a culture shock. It can be just like they're not accustomed to that. So I can see how that could cause, some tension, if you will. But once again, I think that's why this conversation is so important. As men, we have to become comfortable becoming that way. Nurturing, empathetic, compassionate does not make us weak, right? So those qualities, those inner ways of being as men, we have to be willing to embrace for this movement, if you will, this new masculinity that I'm talking about, to take hold and make a positive impact on the world. Now, I have not had the opportunity to read your book, but I am. And I'm curious, what might be the biggest stereotype about men and teaching that you want to shatter?
Well, the book, for those of you when you read the book, you'll learn that in many ways I go back before I go forward. Meaning, the book starts in the 18th century, 1790s, and it shatters a stereotype, particularly around men of color in education, around our college attendance, around how we showed up, how we learned. The first person in the book is John Chavis, who attended Princeton University in the 1790s.
Wow.
So when you read the book, you're saying, hold on, black people went to college in the 1790s? Free black man. Okay, that's one stereotype I just didn't know. He doesn't graduate from there, but he graduates from Washington and Lee. From there, he goes off and starts his own school. He was self-taught to begin with. Now you have a black man, black male educator, who's starting his own school. But here's another stereotype that the book shatters. He had black and white students in the early 1800s,
Wow.
in North Carolina. You're thinking, whoa, people weren't learning to read, and especially weren't teaching black people to read back in the 1800s. Yes, they were. They were. I mean, obviously, it was very rare, but you'll learn about someone who was able to move around other white folks and teach their children to the point where one of his former students went on to become a U.S. senator from the state of North Carolina.
Wow.
And so particularly it starts off with a wow, oh, really? But then it gets into sort of how what was happening in the country around literacy, around education in the early 1800s, in the mid 1800s, around the anti-literacy law campaigns that made it illegal to teach black students. And it sort of comes after the Nat Turner Rebellion, a preacher who was literate and who was deemed to say, hey, an educated black man is a dangerous black man. And so the stereotypes are about how we value education very early on, but also it does shatter a little of stereotypes around the supports that it took to get there, which included a lot of white philanthropists and white beneficiaries and benefactors who helped a lot of African Americans move through the world and to get education. That again, in the world right now where we're so divided and people think everything is black versus white, if you read the book, I'm clear to highlight the men and women who helped these men education move throughout the world, because I believe it is a blueprint for where we move now. That it gets to the work that I'm doing right now. This idea to increase male educators cannot be something just for men. We need women in philanthropy. We need women in leadership. We need women politicians to believe the same way that we believe in the need for better forms of masculinity, more male educators, that in the way that a lot of the supporters and benefactors in the past supported the men that I highlight in the book. And so the idea that this is a team effort, that it's not specific to a certain group, but also that groups fought for education very early on and were so innovative in getting things done and did everything they could to make sure that children could read and write in a way that I think we need to get back to in this generation.
Now, see, I'm really looking forward to reading the book. That's some information I did not know. So I'm again really looking forward to that. Now, we've talked about your book, and it definitely ties into your male educator network. So tell us a little bit about that organization, what you started.
So we started early this year, in partnership with Richard Reeves and the American Institute for Boys and Men. We're independent of them, but we started in collaboration with them because, in as much as the work I was doing as Real Men Teach was shattering stereotypes and changing narratives around what it meant to be a male educator, what we were not doing is addressing the systems that created the issue in the first place. We weren't looking at policy change. We weren't working with politicians. We weren't, looking at funding in these spaces that I was doing in my other role in Washington D.C. At the time when I was working at another think tank. And so myself and Richard Reeves came together and said, in order to really address this and to make sure that 23% of educators doesn't go to 13, we have to go to the heart of the problem is looking at what are states and the federal government doing to open up opportunities for male educators, for men to become educators. What is higher education? What are university presidents and schools of education? What are they doing to ensure that you have more men in education? What are states doing around registered apprenticeships, teacher residencies, more non-traditional pathways into the classroom? How are they supporting it with funding, supports? And so what I'm doing now is much more foundational. I'm creating an institution to ensure that we have a long-term plan. At the same time, still working with Real Men Teach and other brand partners to say we also have to ensure that you can put as much money you want into scholarships for male educators and making sure it costs you nothing to go to school. But if in their mind, coach, they believe that men don't teach or that men are incapable of teaching or it's not a masculine job, then it won't matter the scholarship won't matter. They won't apply for it. In many ways, when I started Real Men Teach, I would get phone calls from guys who had scholarships. They would say, hey, Kurt, I created a scholarship for male educators, but no one's applying. So you did all the work. You found a solution to a problem we thought we had, but we realized the problem was deeper. The problem really was around men didn't believe that it was masculine to become a school teacher. So they didn't even apply for the scholarship. So for us, it is a twofold process. You address the systems that got us here. You support and build up those systems to get better, but you also have the support of Real Men Teach movements and images and men like you and your podcast and others to say, brothers, this is important work. This is men's work at the highest level, and there's support for you to do so. When I finished Morehouse, I went off to South Africa and I became a Peace Corps volunteer. I did most of I lived in Africa for on and off for most of my 20s. And unless you've lived in an African village like I have, you have no idea how important men are in these spaces and how they show up and how they are and how the village, in these cases, off the beaten path villages, move and ebb and flow based off of how men show up. And so you think about South Africa. I came in the early 2000s, where a lot of these communities were struggling with a lot of issues. And when I came in, Coach, I realized there were hardly any men in the community. Where are all the guys? Where are all the men? Oh, they're all in Johannesburg working in the mines because we don't have any jobs here in these rural areas. And I said, well, when do they come home? Oh, they come home twice a year. We see them Christmas and we see them Easter. That's it.
Wow.
And so I was like, so what happened? So what do they do? Oh, they're there and they send money back, but they're not here. So who's raising these children? It's just the mothers and these young boys. And I'm looking around. And so it came quite easy to realize this is why young men in South Africa weren't doing well. All the men are gone. They all 10 hours away working in the mine, sending money back home. And so we have to look at systems that take men away from our communities. And so the work around my organization is we're talking about male educators, but I'm going to be in conversations I know with people who are talking about national service, around the economy, about living wage, around how we ensure that we keep men in our communities, because we don't have them, you will have both boys and girls struggling. And if they're both struggling, then our communities will no longer thrive.
Oh, wow. Wow. Now, let's imagine your movement succeeds beyond your wildest expectations. 10 years from now, what would you want America's classrooms to look like and feel like? And what percentage of the teaching workforce would you like to see represented by men?
Good question. So we have a target, and it hasn't been public, but I guess I'll announce it here. We have a goal of 40 by 40. We have a goal of 40% of all teachers in America being men by 2040. Now, 2040 is 14 years from now, right? 14 years. So a 22-year-old in 2040 is how old right now? Was it 8? Right? So my goal, my campaign is to look at every 8-year-old in America, 8-year-old boy, and to say, as early as 8 years old, I think you'd be a great teacher, because by 2040 we're going to need you. And to set up structures and to dispel stereotypes and to put in systems to make sure that at 22 and 2040 that we have at least 40%. Now people are saying, Curtis, how can you get to that point? You only at 17%? Well, the percentage of people right now in America who are eligible for retirement in teaching is through the roof. And I don't have the exact number, but it's close to 30% who are eligible for retirement now, including my wife. She's over. And so we're gonna have this. You talking about we have a teacher shortage now. You talking about teacher shortage now, Coach? We're gonna be looking around like, what are we gonna do when we have, 50 kids in the classroom? We have an opportunity right now to fill our classrooms with all these teachers leaving in the next few years with retirement, with young men. And my point is, when I go to places, I'm in New Mexico, I'm in Virginia, Washington State, California, Maryland, working with folks from all over the country. And I'm saying, you are sourcing your most important workforce, which is teaching, from only half the population. Only half the population is even thinking about being a teacher. What's happened to the other half? You saying you got a teacher shortage? What have you done to recruit more male teachers? Well, we put up a sign and we did commercials. As you know, communicating with men, young men, it's not the same way to communicating with young women, and that's not arguable. It's just what it is.
Absolutely.
Men need to be direct. You can't put up a flyer on the street and say, "Oh, well, we put a guy on the flyer." That's not.
No.
That's not going to matter.
Yeah.
What did the study? I told you earlier. What did the study say earlier? I said 70% of the men who were teachers were spoken to directly by another male teacher. It is the one-to-one. It is your coach. It is your pastor. It is your barber. It is your parent saying, "I didn't see no flyer, but Curtis, I know you'd be a great teacher. And if you became a teacher, I'd be so proud of you." And I'd post it on social media and I'd tell the world, and we'd throw a party for you. And every year we go to your classroom, we'd help you fund it, and we'd make sure every student you had a job after. And if somebody heard that you're going to celebrate me the same way you celebrated the guy who played in the NFL, in the same way the guy who became a medical doctor and a teacher, and you're going to celebrate me? Right now, Doc, I'm putting together a strategy, man. I want every parent of a teacher in this country, particularly a male teacher, to have a sticker on the back of their car, Coach, that says, "My son is a teacher." With pride. With pride.
Absolutely.
We don't hide anymore from being teachers. When I started real men teach, guys were like, "Man, do I want to wear a shirt to the grocery store telling people I'm a teacher?" I'm like, "Hold on, bro. When you wear it, you're gonna get congratulated." And then guess what? As you wear it all around, when you wear this shirt, you're gonna get stopped. And
Absolutely.
it's gonna be a positive, it ain't gonna be a negative one. Because we walk with pride. I'm a teacher. And I love it. When we walk with that confidence, young boys will see it and they'll want to mirror it.
Yeah, it's amazing because when I do wear the shirt, the first thing people ask, "What do you teach?"
Yep.
That's the first. That's the first. They don't say nothing. They say, "What do you teach?"
Love it. And they're looking at you thinking, they're downloading thinking, he must be smart. He's a teacher. He must know a lot about something. He must look, whatever he teaches, he knows a lot about.
There you go.
He must like young people. He must have. There's things. Those are all compliments.
Absolutely.
I've never heard someone say, "Oh, you're a teacher. You must be broke." I've never heard anybody say that.
Right.
"Oh, you're a teacher. You must couldn't find a job nowhere else." What are you talking about? No. I mean, even though those are out there, those are stereotypes as well. But I've never encountered someone where that came. It was always with respect and reverence. They understand, and they also know how hard it is. "Oh man, I know these kids are stressing you out. I appreciate you." It's always respect. It's always respect.
Yeah.
It's support. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So as we wind down, I want to give you an opportunity, first of all, or now, to just share from your heart a message to the audience about your movement, about your vision for the future for men in education.
Well, I wrote this book, Reimagining the Future of Education, because I understood that we're living in this era now where we're struggling to find out where to go and how to get there. And we've lost our way because a lot of us have forgotten our own history. And so this book takes us back 250 years. As you're reading it, you're going through the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, and now, and you will walk away with confidence to understand that there are folks who were able to do much more with less, and to push through eras that were, and even in some ways, harder than where we are right now. But we walk through, and we're a part of a lineage and a community of men and women, particularly in education, who've done so much with so little and have set a foundation for us. And so when I started my group, it was really about creating an institution that was going to surpass me and that'll last longer after I'm gone. And that men and women who could say, I was educated by a teacher who came through this movement that Curtis Valentine started will be the ultimate compliment to me and everybody who comes after me. When I wrote this book, I wrote it really for my children, for my son and my daughter. They can walk away and say, Dad, these men who who are relatives of ours, who are educators of yours, I know so much more about you, Dad, now that you've written this book. And now I know why you move the way you move. I want people to be able to walk away and say, I need to do more history about my own family, about my own teachers, about what role education played in my family's life going back. And I think once you do that, the way you move forward will be much easier.
Nice. So how can people find out more about you and your movement?
So you can go to maleeducators.org to learn more about our group, join our network, become part of our brotherhood, to follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, but also go to Amazon.com. Real Men Teach, the book. Get your copy today. Get it for yourself. Get it for a man in your life. Read it. Start a book club. Have this conversation about how far we've come in education, but also how we can use what we learned from them to move forward into the future.
Nice. So I want to end with the title of your book and movement, which is Real Men Teach. Now, when you say those three words today, what do they mean to you? Not simply as an educator, but as a man.
Well, Real Men Teach is about giving back. It's about sacrifice. It's about saying, my legacy will be what I leave behind to others. And so whenever I'm moving through the world, I know I'm not moving alone. That people are watching me by how I show up, how I dress. And so when I walk out of the house wearing this shirt, I know that I have to move in a way that also respects the role that people as teachers play. Because if I'm out here not showing up the proper way, I'm also representing all teachers. And so that's really how I think we all should think about this work. That Real Men Teach is about how you pay it forward to the next generation because someone else paid it forward for you.
Absolutely. Well, Curtis, man, I'm super proud of what you're doing, man. I'm glad you stuck with it. You know, I've known you since you first launched this thing, and I've just watched you continue to move forward. And like I said, I'm on your team, man, and I appreciate the man that you are, the movement that you've started, and how you're leaving a legacy of intelligence. So I love you, bro. I'm just super proud to be associated with you.
Now, the feeling is mutual. I think I'm not here if I wasn't for brothers like yourself who've done this. And so obviously I get a lot of compliments on the work I do, but I'm always giving back and saying, do you know Michael Taylor? Have you met him? Have you met this brother, met that brother? Because I'm not here without brothers like you. And so, but also that's why I'm so confident. I know I'm not doing this alone.
Yeah,
I,
absolutely.
I know I got a whole team. I got an army. Like I walk into these rooms with an army of men behind me, and they must wonder why I'm so confident. I said, "Well, you met Mike Taylor because he got my back. But you ain't gonna mess with me because I'm gonna call my big bro." So that's the thing I think we have to understand when we move through spaces together. That's where confidence comes from.
Yeah. Well, again, appreciate you, man, for what you're doing. So this has been another episode of Shatter the Stereotypes. I want you to think about this. Real men teach. We'll see you next episode. Take care.